Okay, we're now recording. Alex Bagwell is a classically trained pianist who also plays jazz and sings, specializing in the songs of Paul Robeson, the ones he sang. Alex first met Paul Robeson in 1958 for his master's degree in his final project at SF State on the life and songs of Paul Robeson. He interviewed 21 people who knew Paul Robeson. His wife, Harriet Bagwell, is a retired clinical laboratory scientist. She's an expert in hematology who worked in that field for 30 years. She began to sing Robeson's songs with Alex in 1964, the year that they got married. Both Alex and Harriet are in the SF Rockin' Solidarity Chorus. They've traveled to South Africa twice, where they met Nelson and Winnie Mandela, and sang all over the country, performing with Bukani Matwetu, which means people arise. Great name. So we're now going to hear a song that was sung by Paul Robeson. It's going to be performed today by Alex and Harriet Bagwell. Wait till I unmute you. Alex and Harriet, wave at me. Alex and Harriet, are you still here? I hope so. Does anybody else see them on the screen? Have they disappeared? If they have, I need one of the co-hosts probably to call.
Here they are. They just came back.
Okay, here we go. I'm admitting them, or somebody else did it, and I'll let them know that I've introduced them. And Alex and Harriet, when they can hear, okay, Alex and Harriet, I just introduced you. And can you unmute yourselves? I can't hear you. So you have to hit the button that says mute or unmute to unmute yourself. Alex and Harriet, unmute yourself.
Okay. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can. Okay, it's your turn to sing the first song of your three.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. We had some kind of a problem. Sorry about that.
But you overcame it. So here you are.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. the white gleam of our bright star is cast.
Let's hear it for Alex and Harriet Bagwell. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. Now we're going to hear from the person in the Gray Panthers, San Francisco Gray Panthers, who is most responsible for this program. She was one of the founders, along with Deecha Bowler, of the Paul Robeson Committee of the Gray Panthers. Barbara's a longtime San Francisco Gray Panther whose passion is Paul Robeson and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And Barbara, if you can unmute yourself, and it's your turn. I don't see you on the screen. Are you still there? There you go. Barbara, you need to unmute yourself. You click on the button that's on the lower left-hand corner of your screen that has a microphone icon. Look for the microphone icon and click on it. Let me see if I can do it, if you can't. Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Tell her to move her mouse around if she has a mouse, because sometimes you don't see that bottom screen.
Okay, she probably heard you. Thanks for the suggestion. Barbara, try moving your mouse around on the screen, and maybe the microphone icon will appear. Looks like, you still are muted. I'm gonna, let's see. Are there any other co-hosts able to do anything to unmute everybody? All I have is mute all current and new participants.
Yeah, I think it's a problem with Zoom that the host cannot unmute people. To me, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, so
she
Barbara,
could call on her phone.
That's right. I think she's going to get help. I think her daughter helps her with her Zoom, so she may be going to get that help. And then when she gets back, we can ask her to call in.
She seems to be using a laptop, and maybe she can't manipulate the cursor to the icon.
If necessary, we can go on to the next song, and then we can, by the time she gets back, we may have the problem solved. Barbara, you got help there? Okay, good. We need to unmute Barbara.
Don't be so.
There
Yeah.
she is. All right. Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay.
Thank you.
Struggle. My latest struggles are always with a computer. I don't get into riots. I just struggle with a computer. Yes, I wanted to tell you about a wake-up call I had. In 1949, I was just graduating from high school. There was no reason that I wouldn't have known that things were happening around the world. My parents were educated, they talked around the dining room table and informed us of some things. But apparently in 1949, it was not broadcast that there was a riot in Peekskill. And in just about 10 years ago, when the Gray Panther Book Club was reading Howard Zinn's wonderful People's History of the United States, it said, oh, in 49, there was a riot in Peekskill. And I thought, oh no, that can't be true because I didn't hear about it. So I was just upset because it was only 50 miles from my town. Peekskill was not far from me. I lived in the Catskills, and there was no reason that the newspapers wouldn't have something about it. But now I know there are several reasons. Most of them are racist related, probably. For instance, this is what Rainbow is giving out this week. It's beautiful. See it? But there's somebody missing. there is a black man missing. And guess who it is? Robeson. This was put out today. This is for Valentine's Day this week. And Rainbow is supposed to be a progressive organization. So there you go. I wanted just to tell you that Peekskill involved 2 concerts. The first one was canceled because there were threats. They had heard that the Klan was going to be there. So they put it off for a week. They got buses from Harlem to come up on that following week. Nothing happened for a while. The participants, the audience who came to hear him sing, it was a benefit for the Civil Rights Congress was meeting there in Peekskill. And so it was a benefit for civil rights. The participants who were coming decided that they better protect Robeson because there was still blood in the air. They circled him and he sang his concert, but on the way, after he finished, the crowd, the Klansmen were there throwing bottles and hitting people with baseball bats, and it was a terrible thing. And so no one has forgotten Peekskill. No one who was there ever forgets. And to this day, you know, you're just sitting around talking about Robeson and somebody will say, were you in Peekskill, you know? So I was going to pass now to Alex is going to tell you a little story. He was interviewing friends of Robeson's before they died. And he has something to read to you that he learned from a friend of Robeson's. Move into the center, Alex, so we can see you.
You also need to unmute yourself. You're muted right now. So find the microphone icon on your screen and click on that microphone icon so you're unmuted. Okay, I think, there you go.
Good.
I interviewed about 21 of Robeson's friends, and this is one of the interviews of his bodyguard.
A little louder. Little louder. Come closer to the microphone.
And their visit to Charlie Chaplin.
Oh,
We went with Robeson to Charlie Chaplin's house. I think he was raising some money for Carlotta Bass for the California Eagle. They went out to talk with Chaplin, to visit with Chaplin. So we got to the house there. And when we got there, Chaplin was making all kind of funny noises for his kids and so forth. He had a big place, a big mansion type of thing. As far as you could see was land. And we came in the house. And Robeson and Chaplin began to talk. And he was making all kinds of gestures. And he said, Paul, if I could just have directed you in Othello, I would have had you do this. And he was making all kinds of faces and things and gestures. Anyway, he went through all kinds of stuff. Then we were going to have dinner with him. I looked at the table setting. I wasn't used to that kind of thing. I was used to a knife, a fork, and a spoon. They had all this silverware lined out there. They had cold plates sitting on the table. I'm looking at this. I'm used to eating out of a plate sitting in front of me. I used to eat from, so I'm sitting there sweating it out. I looked at the steaks for each of us. My folks used to feed a whole family on a steak like that. Big, thick, nice thing. Anyway, they got all the stuff together And I took some food and put it on the plate in front of me. Oh, the butler. A white butler, incidentally. The butler me and set another one down. I didn't know what was going on. I was kind of getting disturbed there a little. Then after we got all the food on the table, on the plate, I wasn't used to all this silverware, all that kind of thing, all that kind of eating. I didn't know where to begin, you know. Suddenly, I was sweating and looking around me, and Paul was talking. He was still talking to Charlie Chaplin. And he glanced over there at me, and he kept talking. As he was talking, he reached over and picked up a fork. As he kept on talking to Chaplin, I looked over there and saw him, and I picked up the fork. We went right on through the whole meal like that. He picked up, and I got to the end of the meal and left. On the table was a little 3-pronged fork and a wide-mouthed spoon. I thought, I wonder what those are for. So they brought some sort of dessert out, and I was a little weird. It was a little weird-looking thing. They had meringue-type stuff whipped up. Oh, it looked like they had whipped cream or something in there. You know, you put it in a bowl, and you take the little 3-pronged fork, and you rake it up into this spoon, and then you eat it. But I'm telling you, it was interesting just to see the human side of this man, the warmth and the understanding that he had. Realizing that I was kind of lost there, and he just guided me right on through without ever looking. And he knew that I was watching him.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, and he'd hold the piece up. I'd cut my eye and go right ahead, and nobody ever knew I was lost there. And that was about the end of that part about that particular incident. And that was Chuck Mosley, right? That was Chuck Mosley, his bodyguard.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that story. Are you and Harriet ready to do your second song?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's see, Joe. Sure, here. Okay. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. In Salt Lake Joe, by God, my bed, they framed you on a murder charge, says Joe, but I ain't dead. Says Joe, but I ain't dead. The copper bosses says I takes more than guns to kill a man, says Joe, I didn't die. Says Joe, I didn't die. And standing there as big as life and smiling with his eyes, Joe says what they can never kill. Went on to organize. Went on to organize. Joe Hill ain't dead, he says to me. Joe Hill ain't never died. Where working folk defend their rights, Joe Hill is at their side. Joe Hill is at their side. From San Diego up to Maine, in every mine and mill, where workers strike and organize, it's there you'll find Joe Hill. It's there you'll find Joe Hill. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. I never died, says he.
Thank you, Harriet and Alex. Okay, now we're going to hear from Deecha Bowler. Deecha, you want to unmute yourself? Deecha is going to talk about the Paul Robeson songbook that is
Ta-da.
produced by the Gray Panthers and the committee for Paul Robeson. Go ahead, Deecha.
Yeah, so here's the songbook. But what I wanted to start with was the subject of Joe Hill, because I became acquainted with Paul Robeson. My first year of college, I was in the library and listening to records on their record player. And I came upon Paul Robeson singing Joe Hill. And it knocked me out. I played it over and over again and learned it. And that was the beginning of a commitment to both social action and singing with other people. And I started going to hootenannies. They used to have hootenannies in New York. We'd be in these dark rooms and everybody's singing. And I can't tell you what that feeling was like to sing together with other people. And then for me, there was a message, and it seared the message into my head. And it had to do with labor rights and social rights and freedom and peace. And I've been committed to that ever since. So that's my story. And I think it shows the power of song. And that's what Paul Robeson was about. He devoted his life at all and any expense to singing to people and singing the songs of his choice, which had to do with the rights of Negroes in this country, anywhere else, but was an issue here for sure, and labor rights, and then civil rights for everybody, and peace in the world. He stuck to that his entire life. So Barbara and I somehow, I don't know how it happened, decided to make a songbook of his songs to get it into the schools and to, so the UU Church funded us to print out the books. So that's how they got done. But the process, we got together with Alex and Harriet to decide on what songs to put in. And then I went to the main library, and with the help of the librarians there, I found the songs to copy on their copy machine, and I just copied them. So since we kind of, there's a copyright question about producing a book, so we can't sell them, but we feel free to use them. And if people want them, they can have them, and we would like a donation in order to replace them, because the idea of going to the schools with them still exists. And in fact, I'm thinking that we could manage technologically, if the kids don't get back into school, to have them sing along together online and from the book. And the book has 29 songs in it, and it has pieces of history so that they're learning about him. There, can you see it? And then here's the table of contents. There's 29 songs, and this is how they look. They're very legible, and it's so portable. They don't even, like they don't have glee clubs or music or art or anything in the schools anymore, I understand, but they could just sit at their chairs or their desks and each have a songbook, or even share them if they need to, and sing together. So that was our intention. Let's see. I don't, maybe I could, some of the songs, it goes from All Through the Night, Balm in Gilead, By and By, Oh Danny Boy, Deep River, Didn't My Lord Deliver Daniel, Drink to Me Only with Thine Eyes, Finlandia, on and on. Will David Play on Your Harp? Will David Play on Your Harp? So now we need to work to get it in the schools, and anyone who wants to help is more than welcome to get together with us. And so Robeson knew 20 languages, and he could sing in them too. And he did sing all over the world, including in China and in Africa. And after he spent time in Africa, he decided he would prefer to be called African rather than American or African American, because he felt more comfortable there because he didn't have the race problem. And he enjoyed their culture. And in fact, he became an expert in linguistics. And of some interest is that some of the African languages are tonal, just like Chinese is, so that the different tone that you say a syllable in changes the meaning of it, which to me is formidable. So with that,
DJ?
yeah, that's it. So
Thank you. I was going to tell people how they can get a copy of this. If they put their contact information in the chat, or email me, or the Gray Panther. I think it's easier to email me than go to the Gray Panther email address. So artpersico@gmail.com. It's ARTPERSYKO@gmail.com. Or you can call me 650-228-4188, or put your name and contact information in the chat. We have 20 of these, and what we're going to add is a couple of inserts. One is going to be a poem by the late poet Raven Bagwell, and he's the child of the Bagwells. And also were 3 book reviews, I believe, that Barbara Lee wrote in the SF Grey Panther newsletter, and that's going to be an insert as well. We only have 20 of these. So
Art, they were not book reviews, they were accounts about Robeson.
okay, I stand corrected. Those 2 inserts will be added if you want, and then if you want to make a donation, the suggested amount's $10, but it's free or whatever you want to donate. So thank you for that. Thank you, Deecha. Michael, do you want to say something?
The chat has a thing you can click on to get the 3 articles on Robeson.
Okay, thanks for putting that in there. And now we're going to hear another song from Harriet and Alex, the 3rd and final song from them.
We've been having a terrible time. I keep, I don't know, it says I don't know, something's wrong. But anyway,
Are you going to be able to?
we get through this. Hope we
Yeah.
get through this without. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes Zoom technology isn't perfect.
Okay, we've never had this much of a problem. I don't really understand what's going on. I decided not to do it with the video, thinking it might be better.
Okay, go
Okay.
for it.
We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Brothers, sisters, all. Every rung goes higher and higher. Every rung goes higher and higher. Every rung goes higher and higher. Brothers, sisters, all. We are climbing Jacob's ladder.
We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Soldiers of the cross.
Thank you, Deecha, for filling in the Bagwells. I assume that will be all, unless I can come back and finish. But we do have somebody who's going to be speaking, and that is Barbara Lee. Once again, she's working on a way to honor Robeson's life through a resolution or petition. And Barbara, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? And unmute yourself first. Okay, we can hear you now.
You can?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're calling this petition Remember Robeson Petition. And I'll just read it instead of talking. Since the centennial celebration for Paul Robeson and the issuing of his commemorative postal stamp in 2004, there is cause to correct and to review Robeson's life. Robeson's artistic achievements have never been officially recognized. As actor, musician, singer, writer, journalist, orator, linguist, and not to forget, athlete, Paul Robeson was known to everyone living in the USA and abroad. Events important to Robeson's story since his centennial celebration are a few of the following. In 1937, Robeson co-founded and chaired the Council on African Affairs, the first anti-apartheid, anti-imperialist organization in the USA. An artist must take sides, he said. In 1939, CBS Radio produced a broadcast of his performance singing Ballad for Americans. And apparently he wrote that song. And he had 100 voices, a people's chorus, helping him on that production.
No, he didn't.
Yes.
He didn't write that.
Oh, he didn't write it.
No.
Okay. In 1949, Robeson sang before 1,200 delegates to the Bill of Rights Conference. This was the benefit we were talking about before for civil rights in Peekskill, New York. In a letter to President Truman referring to the riot there that lives in infamy, Robeson wrote, quote, "It is by no means an isolated instance of the violation of constitutional rights of American citizens. There is increasing mob violence and brutal atrocities against Negro citizens." In 1950, he sang at Madison Square Garden for benefit for civil rights. And in August 1950, the State Department revoked his passport. He was a very popular person. His right to earn a living from his international performance career was over for the time. And in 1962, I'm going to forget that one. 1956, he was called to testify before the House American Activities Committee. He was asked why he did not stay in the Soviet Union, and he answered, "Because my father was a slave and my people died to build this country. I'm going to stay here and have a part of it just like you. No fascist-minded people will drive me from it." In June 1958, the Supreme Court's Kemp Rule decision ruled it unconstitutional to restrict for political views any American from travel. Robeson's passport was restored and he toured the British Isles, renewing friendships he'd made when filming My Proud Valley in Wales. I don't know if any of you have seen that film. It's just wonderful. Carnegie Hall hosted a tribute to Robeson after his death in 1976. Sidney Poitier said of him, "When Paul died, it marked the passing of a magnificent giant, a dedicated humanist who conferred nobility upon us all." In 1995, Roby of Rutgers was finally inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. And in 1998, he received a Grammy Award. Friends of the Negro Spirituals, initiated and petitioned by the San Francisco Gray Panthers, awarded Paul Robeson their prestigious Heritage Keeper Award in 2017. That was quite an occasion. I don't know if any of you remember Mitzi. Mitzi received the award and she clasped it to her chest and just hugged it. It was so beautiful. Paul Robeson used his talent and fame to become a world spokesman for peace and friendship between peoples. In so doing, he united people in harmony through the beauty of his voice. Whether crooning the Brahms lullaby to his son, Paul Robeson Jr., or singing Cantara Maria and Old Man River in support of Spain's war against fascism, or whether raising funds for Henry Wallace's bid to be president of the United States. His fine, strong baritone was unforgettable. In view of this partial list of his extraordinary achievements, we are petitioning museum benefactors throughout the world, the globe, for funds to exhibit, to make an exhibit of his life achievements, along with computerized access to recordings of his songs of all peoples and all nations. My idea is to have them sponsor a jukebox so that children go in and push a button and hear him sing Old Man River. People think that's pretty funny, but I think it's a great idea. So that's our petition. We will be getting this around. It'll be online, etc. Thank you for listening and thank you for coming to the program.
It's not over. Thank you, Barbara. Now we have time, maybe 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A for Alex and Harriet and any of the other presenters or comments. How we can try to do this. I mean, it's not much time, but if you raise your hand using the reactions button or physically raise your hand, you'll need to unmute yourself also. Okay, I told Alex I would call on him. He has something else he wanted to say. So Alex, are you here? Are you able to unmute
Ah,
yourself? Alex?
yeah, there they are.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Alex. You had a comment?
yeah, what did I want to say? I don't know, Alex.
You can let somebody ask a question.
Yeah. Ask a question.
Okay. Who has a question? Raise your hand. I see David Williams. I saw Sherry. Who else has a question? Raise your hand either using the button or your hand, and I'll try to note or put it in the chat.
David?
Alex, can you sing Water Boy?
Okay.
Not right now, though, right?
Wait,
We're
that's
doing
not-
Q&A.
yeah.
We're doing,
Q&A.
yeah, maybe later.
Before
Uh,
3 o'clock.
Sherry.
What grade levels would you
Okay,
like this?
Huh?
What grade levels would you like the songbook to be in the schools? I'm curious if you're talking elementary, middle, or high school, or all of them. What do you
What
looking
do you
for?
suggest?
It's a good
don't-
question. I don't know. Maybe
I think some of the songs are quite simple so that they can be introduced at any level.
okay. Good.
Are
That's
there any
my
other
own view.
more questions? Are there
Sounds
more
good.
questions? Okay, Betty, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question related to Barbara Lee mentioning about having a museum that would, or more than one museum that would do a exhibit. I just wondered if anybody knows if Paul Robeson is honored in the new African American Museum, Smithsonian in Washington D.C. Is he part of that? And if not, we should petition to have him represented in that museum. And I think wonderful idea to have something they could push a button and hear him sing a song or two at that museum.
Yeah,
That was all.
that's a good idea. I'm not sure that it's been done, quite frankly.
Mhm. Okay.
Barbara, do you want
I'll
to?
ask about it.
Yeah.
I'll ask about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Barbara, do you want to comment?
We have work to do. We need to find out if he is remembered in any museums. There's a museum in Detroit, which I went to, and there was nothing about him. Everybody else was mentioned, but not Paul Robeson.
Okay.
I don't know if we can find some more people on the committee because I'm running out of energy. So I'm looking at maybe some younger great Panthers and invite anyone to join us.
Put your name in the chat if you want to help Barbara and Deecha and the committee to perpetuate the memory of Paul Robeson. It's a worthy project, obviously. Who else has a question or comment for the presenters or for the, okay, Michael?
This is a question for Deecha. Didn't Mitzi pick Paul Robeson up at the airport? And there was kind of an amusing story about that.
Yes.
Barbara.
Well, the story was falsely relayed. Mitzi forgot. She thought that she had picked him up from where? San Francisco airport. Turned out that she was helping Belafonte with the Peace Arch Park concert. She picked him up from Seattle or something. When he got into her car, apparently the whole car was weighted down. He was so big, and she will never forget that and always laughed when she was telling that story. Yes.
He was 6'3"
Poor.
and he weighed 200 pounds.
He made more than 200.
I think so. More
Other,
like
other questions or comments? Raise your hand. Feel free to do so. We also have a standing request for Waterboy performance. And Alex also, there was something he was going to mention. I don't know if you're, so are there more questions or comments from people who haven't had a chance to ask one yet? So Alex and Harriet, do you want to sing that song, or do you have something else you wanted to
Okay,
say?
okay, I'll sing it. That's was Waterboy.
Yeah.
Waterboy, where are you hiding? Now, if you don't come, I'm gonna tell your daddy. There ain't no hammer that's on this rock, boy. That rings like mine, boy. That rings like mine. I done bust this rock, boy, from here to Macon, all the way to the jail, boy. Yes, back to the jail.
Done bust this rock, boy, from here to Macon, all the way to the jail.
You jack a diamond, yeah, you jack a diamond. Well, I know you are old, boy. Yes, I know you are old. You robbed my pocket. Yeah, you robbed my pocket. You done robbed my pocket of the silver and gold.
You robbed my pocket of all my silver and all my gold.
What a boy, where are you hiding? Now, if you don't come, I'm gonna tell your daddy.
Ooh, water boy.
Okay, that ends part one of our Great Panther meeting. We'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back with more from Alex about the psychopathology of racism and Clarence Thomas on how they fought white nationalists in the Longshoremen's Union. So we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. Thank you. Take a break.
One, two, three. Oh. Ah. Ooh. I need you.
David, thank you for requesting that.
That was beautiful, just beautiful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Oh, Barbara Lee, I wanted to tell you, I just checked the website for the Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture, and they do have a section under their one about entertainment on Paul Robeson. He is mentioned in the website, and so I don't know exactly what the exhibit is, but they mention him singing in Othello. I put it in the chat. The quote they have, I put in the chat a little bit ago. So he is represented there, it looks like.
He acted in Othello. He didn't sing.
Oh, well, you can read the chat in the chat what they said.
I went to a different part of that website, and he's apparently there are 19 entries on him somewhere. I haven't been through to him yet, but yeah, these there. It's difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
There.
Oh, great. Even
Now,
more, 19.
Tried the museum in Chicago.
Okay, that's great to know.
That's as good because I had a theater history book that didn't mention him at all.
Mm-hmm.
And he was supposed to have been the best actor of Othello ever, including, you know, in the theater in Stratford-on-Avon. He was better than anyone else. Oh, it's just maddening.
Alice, remind me what the name of the museum in Chicago is?
Yes, what is it? Um, I mean, the African American Museum. Oh,
Well, when you remember, let me know.
I can look it up. The museum in Chicago.
Yeah.
You're talking about the African American Museum.
The one that's in Washington Park.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, Harold Washington. I mean, is
No,
his name?
no.
Oh.
Saddle, that's what it is. New Saddle Museum.
It's 2:00 and I hope people are back from their breaks. If you're not a member of the Gray Panthers, please consider joining. You can contact me, Art Persico. Send me an email, artpersico@gmail. It's ARTPERSYKO@gmail.com. You can call me 650-228-4188, 650-228-4188. Go to the Gray Panther Facebook page. Michael, is that true? Can they communicate through the Facebook page with us or the website?
It would probably be better to email it or speak with you directly.
Okay.
Can you put your number and your email in the chat so we can read it? Because it's too fast.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
You know, I said it twice, but I know it was pretty fast.
It's fast for me.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put it in there right now.
Thanks.
And yeah, we're also looking for board members. So if anybody is really jazzed about the Gray Panthers and wants to help plan these meetings, which is, you know, your chance to make, you know, have your ideas appear in public, please join us. We are actively seeking members and board members. And also there's, you know, the songbook. You can put, if you want the songbook, put your name in there. Okay, I put my phone number and my email address in the chat so you can copy it. You can save the chat at the end of the meeting or anytime you want by clicking on the 3 dots at the bottom of the chat. On the right side, you'll see a little rounded corner rectangle that says file, and right next to that, 3 dots. You click on that and it'll say save chat, and you click on save chat and it'll save it for you. Okay, so we're gonna restart the meeting content with Alex Bagwell is going to make a 10-minute presentation about the psychopathology of racism. Alex, are you back with us?
Yes, Harriet is supposed to introduce me.
Okay, take it away, Harriet.
Alex Bagwell, my husband of 57 years, wrote 2 papers. Pardon?
Yeah, go ahead. It's a little
Okay.
louder.
One, the psychology of prejudice in general and race prejudice in particular. Number 2, the psychopathology of racism. And he wrote that while at the Union Institute before going to San Francisco State for a master's in creative arts. He is primarily a pianist, having started his formal training with his mother at 2.5. And after studying with several teachers, he studied at San Francisco State with Vladimir Brenner and William Allen. And it was doing a study with William Allen that he met Paul Robeson. This was a high point in his life. Later, he interviewed 21 of Robeson's friends and wrote a play around Paul Robeson's life and work. Alex Bagwell.
This is from a book called Moorish Culture, Moorish Culture Bringers by Dr. Jan Carew. He writes, the defeat of the Moors in 1492 deformed the European vision of Africa and Africans. A mutation of febrile and prejudiced European imagination then proceeded to transform Black princes into eternally craven slaves. That is the basis for the pathology of racism. Excuse me. I knew a white man once in the military who was born and reared in the Deep South and had been taught prejudice against Black folk by his parents and the Southern custom without ever having come in close contact with Black people. Later in military service, when I was in military service, he met African Americans and other non-European peoples and became, during my 22 months there, a close friend to a number of them. This was in Germany. This in an atmosphere of otherwise almost rabid antagonism toward African Americans. It was in Gießen, Germany, between 1960 and 62. Being quite young when he joined the military, his prejudices, according to him, were accompanied by, and I would say contradicted by, a youthful sense of wonder, which led to a discovery process culminating in a special sense of relatedness to African Americans. He's been lied to. It's pissed him off. So, in the first paper, I hypothesized a parallel between degrees of narcissism and degrees of affectation by prejudices in general. Presumably, therefore, in the psychology of race prejudice, the same may hold true. That is, we're dealing perhaps with conditioned reflex to visible color. Degrees of race prejudice triggered initially perhaps by visible degrees of difference of skin color. When you're not reacted to on that basis, there's some information about racism that you don't get. That's where the idea that this is a white society comes from, a European society, because you don't get reacted to that way. It explains a lot. According to the Sinhalese great historian Sheikh Anta Diop, he died in 1986, quote, as man Homo sapiens sapiens came out of Africa approximately 30 to 40,000 years ago and changed continents. He adapted, and by a process of natural selection, morphology changed. That tells me that makes man one. Christianity didn't succeed in doing that or anything else. This was truth. On the psychopathology of racism, I think racism as an organic component of capitalism uses narcissism, feeds upon it. As cancer feeds upon the tissue of the organic body. This begins to correlate the narcissist with those affected by race prejudice. If this line of reasoning can be pursued, remaining as far as is within my ability on solid scientific grounds, I believe a definite parallel can be drawn between people I've known who were to different degrees affected by racist teaching and theoretically the contents of different degrees of narcissism. The teachings that cement this interconnection are common in the public and private schools. For example, Dr. Hilliard, a former dean of the education department of San Francisco State University, in a 1991 lecture on the socialization of the African-American child, stated, quote, "All you get out of educational sociology and educational psychology is that Black people are dumb," unquote. This brought back memories of mine when I was taking those courses at State. He was born then, he left State. This in the 50s is when I was taking. In the same speech, Dr. Hilliard stated, quote, "For 400 years, the best minds have been put to work on the job of defaming the African, so that for him, defamation, not prejudice, is our problem. You can't socialize me assuming that what I am and who I am started in 1500. But even after you show the schools and the truth, getting them to teach the truth is the hardest problem. It's hard getting people to read the truth. If you read all the back issues of the Journals of Civilization, African civilizations, you'll get yourself a liberal education if you can pass the test on each one of them. Then you'll know who I am. But you don't know who I am, and most of us in my family don't know who they are, because defamation of African people has been systematic, long-term, pervasive, and continuous. No other population except the Native American in this last 400 years on this continent has suffered that problem. So don't lump the Native American problem and the African American problem, or the African problem, with the problems of prejudice. Our problem is deeper than prejudice and stereotyping. Our problem is defamation. That means taking the information away from me and putting some false information in there about me. It was buried deliberately to placate the outcry against the slave trade raised by European serfs and peasants who were then in the 15th century fighting against the feudal lords, the feudal system. Not knowing this, we later did not know who we were. Dr. Aptheker states, "To rationalize the slave trade and its atrocities came racism, the rationalization of immutable, significant, and inherent inferiority of all colored peoples. as compared to so-called colorless ones. And especially the inferiority of the African and African-derived people. Racism is part of the very definition of capitalism. Imperialism is the conquest of all colored people. Always racism was not only rationalization. Always it also was practice. While it libeled and insulted peoples, it simultaneously subjected them to excruciating regimes of labor, abominable labor conditions, living conditions, and horrendous social practices marked by oceans of blood and burning flesh. The laws, lies, and torments enforced by an avaricious ruling class saw in racism and racist practices devices to maintain that power and to enrich themselves. It is this organic connection between capitalism and racism, between imperialism and racism, that explains the intensity with which such ruling classes, not least in the United States, have retained the ideology and reality of racism despite fierce resistance and despite significant, shall I say, embarrassment, especially as the civilized world has moved toward the termination of colonialism, unquote. It is this which really explains the source and nature of the psychology of race prejudice. In point of historical fact, in 1778, the Confederate States needed votes in the national election against the North to pass Article 1, Section 2 of the US Constitution, and therefore declared the black man 3/5 of a person, as opposed to chattel. It is not unlikely that the historical cognitive dissonance between that edict in the history of the rationalization of slavery and the historical necessity to declare black folk human, since not to do so reflected negatively on white men who enjoyed the beds of black women. That is at the source of the characterizes the psychology of racism. That's Dr. Aptheker. This probability would then correspond to psychopathic personality and paranoid personality. And I'm going to end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we're going to hear from Clarence Thomas, and Alex is going to introduce him.
Bring your chair a little closer to the.
Clarence Thomas is the third generation longshoreman, longshore worker who has 31 years of service in the ILWU, Local 10 in San Francisco. Thomas's activism started in the late 1960s as a member of the Black Student Union at San Francisco State College and as a member of the Black Panther Party in Oakland, California. During his college days at San Francisco State, he was a part of the leadership of the longest student strike in American history, which resulted in the establishment of the first Black Studies department in the School of Ethnic Studies in the country, and both still exist today. He has served as an officer in his local and has been a part of many historical, economic, and social justice struggles for the working class and the oppressed. Clarence organized and led such courageous and rank and file actions as the Million Worker March movement in 2004, calling for workers to break away from the Democratic and Republican parties and organize independently, mobilizing and organizing in their own name. In 2008, shutting down all 29 West Coast ports on May Day to oppose wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In 2010, shutting down 5 Bay Area ports and action for justice for Oscar Grant in jail for killer cops. In 2011, on the 43rd anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, shut down the Bay Area ports for 24 hours as a day of solidarity with the Wisconsin workers. Also in 2011, shutting down docks on December 12th in solidarity with West Coast Occupy Wall Street. In 2014, port shutdown solidarity action for Palestine. In 2015, May Day port shutdown action for resisting police terror. And on May Day 2016, rally and port shutdown in support of Black Lives Matter and the the minimum wage demand of $15 an hour, just to mention a few. Struggles also included 2019-20 activism. As an organizer, joining actor and activist Danny Glover for a community forum to keep the A's in East Oakland, joining Local 10 leadership in the George Floyd Stop Work action on Juneteenth, end systematic racism, stop police terror, and stop privatization of the Port of Oakland, and completing his soon-to-be released book, Mobilizing in Our Own Name, Million Worker March Movement. Although he's retired from the longshore industry, he's not retired from the struggle. This was the radical history of the ILWU and the fight against white supremacy. That's my friend, Clarence Thomas.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, solidarity to all. It's great to be with brothers and sisters and comrades. I see so many. I see brother and comrade Jack Heyman, Alex Bagwell, and Sister Harriet, of course, Stan Woods. I have also, now I'm meeting face to face, Comrade Arthur Persico, Michael Lyon, and all of the others that are on this call. Let me first of all say that I'm honored to be a part of the Gray Panthers event today, honoring the great Paul Robeson, who I consider one of the greatest Americans of the 20th century. I tell my grandson, who's 19 years old, if you could imagine someone like LeBron James being Phi Beta Kappa in college, All-American, singer, orator, graduate from law school, professional athlete, actor. I don't know if I mentioned attorney or not, but attorney, civil rights activist, all in one. That's what Paul Robeson was like. And it's an honor to be with you today. I came on a little late, so I don't know if anyone mentioned that the great Paul Robeson was made an honorary lifetime member of the ILWU. He was, that action was in 1943, led by Harry Bridges at the International Convention. where the delegates and the executive board voted unanimously to bestow that honor to the great Paul Robeson for his devotion to democracy, economic and cultural advancement of all people. I'm sure many of you have seen this famous photograph of Paul speaking. I believe it was in Richmond, if not Oakland, at the Moores Shipyard, where he's singing with workers, sitting down, listening to him. It's a fantastic photo. I'm going to have that in my anthology. As was mentioned by Brother Bagwell, I assume we'll have an anthology coming out, mobilizing in our own name, the Million Worker March movement, because that is in the tradition of the ILWU, and Local 10 has been in the vanguard of that tradition. I'm proud to say one of the most radical, one of the most democratic unions in the United States of America. ILW Local 10 is the only predominantly African-American local on the West Coast, at the third busiest port on the West Coast. Let me first of all say this. As Alex mentioned, I'm a third generation longshore worker. But one of the things that I mentioned in my upcoming anthology was that my earliest memories of learning about the ILWU, Harry Bridges, and Paul Robeson was in the mid-1950s when I was 8 years old. When I was at my grandparents' home. My grandfather became a longshoreman in 1944, Lee Edwards, part of the Great Black Migration. He lived only minutes away from the port in West Oakland. And from time to time, he would bring longshoremen home for lunch. And I can remember distinctively that the first time I ever heard Paul Robeson's name mentioned. And one of the things that I found quite interesting about this is that my grandfather was had great admiration for Paul Robeson. And he spoke of Paul Robeson in the same way that we spoke of Dr. Martin Luther King or Jackie Robinson. And one of the things that intrigued me was that I couldn't figure out why a man that was this important to my grandfather was someone that I had never heard of. I had never read about Paul Robeson in any book. I hadn't seen him on television, and certainly hadn't learned anything about him at school. But my grandfather was a very patient man, and he explained to me that Paul Robeson was accused of being a communist. Well, I knew something about that word because growing up in the aftermath of the Cold War, this is 1955, but some 8 years after the establishment of the national security state, where they used to have us get under the doggone desk at school in case we had an atomic bomb attack. You remember those days. Anyway, suffice it to say that my grandfather tried to explain to me about Paul and these accusations against him. So I really didn't understand the gravity of the Cold War or any of that, but I still had a great amount of affection and honor for my grandfather to try to explain this to me. It was decades later that I learned about who Paul Robeson really was, his association with the ILWU. When we talk about the ILWU's fight against white supremacy, I'd like to go back to the year of 1934, before there ever was an ILWU. This was during the course of the 1934 West Coast waterfront strike, when San Francisco was the #1 port city in the world. And there was an immigrant by the name of Harry Bridges out of Local 10, who was the rank and file leader of that struggle. And something that I think that has not been underscored enough in the history books, labor history, in my opinion, is the fact that something extraordinary happened that impacted directly the Black community. And what that was, people like Harry Bridges, Henry Schmidt, other radicals, leftists of all sorts and descriptions who understood the intersectionality between race and class, knew that they could not win the 1934 strike without the support of the Black community. And for those of you who understand anything about labor history, understand so very well how white supremacy has been used to keep Black folks out of labor. And San Francisco was no exception. As a matter of fact, most of the Blacks who worked on the waterfront in 1934 got there as a result of being a part of scab labor. But Bridges in his wisdom understood, as I mentioned before, the intersectionality between race and class, and how racism and capitalism go together as a hand in glove. They're inseparable. He knew that he needed to have the support of the Black community. So what did he do? He, along with the assistance of C.L. Dellums, one of the leaders of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, were able to appeal to the Black church members to make the proposal to the Black community that if they were to support the strike, that the union would make sure that they would be able to have jobs on that waterfront. Now that, some would say, would be a leap of faith. But I say this, that demonstrated in 1934 that the rank and file leadership of Local 10 and the Pacific Coast ILA realized that Black lives matter. That's really demonstrating that Black lives matter, because we all know what was happening in 1934. So in fact, that move on the part of Bridges and others was challenging even many of the racial attitudes and positions of those who were in the union, who thought that white supremacy and the exploitation and oppression of Black folks was the order of the day. In fact, many folks from Europe, in particular Irish, whose history is so much similar to those of us who come from Africa as it relates to oppression, they bought hook, line, and sinker the whole issue of racism against anti-Black racism against Black folks as being American. But let me move on. There are so many examples of the ILWU, which was born in 1937, that has taken on white supremacy. And need I say that the strike in 1934 was one. And the Black community had a great deal to do with that. And the employers were very pissed off, excuse my longshore language. They could no longer utilize African Americans as scabs. But moving forward to the 1940s, many of you may know that Bridges was married to a Japanese woman. The ILWU opposed the internment of Japanese. In fact, they did even more than that. They encouraged the enlistment of membership of Japanese into the Stockton division of Local 6, the warehouse union. This was in 1945. Solidarity is not an empty slogan. It means giving something up. It means sacrifice. It means showing others that you are in support of their struggle. Let's move ahead to the 1950s and 60s during the Civil Rights Movement. Under the leadership of people like William Bill Chester, who was the first African-American elected to it as an international officer of the ILWU. Local 10 was in the vanguard of the entire ILWU on the question of the civil rights movement. In 1967, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King visited the Bay Area for the purpose of having a fundraiser that was going to feature people like Harold Belafonte, Joan Baez, and others for the purpose of raising money for the SCLC at the Oakland Coliseum. Dr. King said that he could not come to the Bay Area and pay homage to the ILWU for all of the support that it had provided over the years. He spoke that night, September 1967, was made an honorary member, talked about the relationship between the civil rights movement and the labor movement, how the idea of the sit-in strikes came from the workers at United Auto Workers from Flint, Michigan, who took over the plants. Talked about the relationship between labor and the civil rights movement, that the same people who were opposed to civil rights were the same people that were opposed to labor rights. Let's move on to the 1970s. 1971, at the convention in Honolulu, the first African-American president of ILWU Local 10, Cleophas Williams, introduced a resolution calling for justice for Angela Davis and bail. Yes, unanimously passed. This is I describe this history that I'm discussing right now as a living history, not a history that is in a museum, not a history that is in a book, but generations upon generations who have taken on the mantle of moving forward in the tradition of rank and file, bottom up social justice unionism. Let's move on. Let's move on to the later middle 1970s, when a rank and filer by the name of Leo Robinson, who was so disturbed after witnessing the Soweto massacres in South Africa and the murder of students, that he wrote a resolution calling for the boycott of South African cargo. That spawned various kinds of activities amongst the rank and file, notably the organizing of the Southern Africa Liberation Support Committee, the first labor organization opposing apartheid in South Africa. Let's move on to the middle 1980s. Howard Keeler, one of the oldest living ILWU Local 10 pensioners today, wrote a resolution calling for the refusal to handle South African cargo, which led to 11 days, violating Taft-Hartley and every contract obligations, where members were being threatened with hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawsuits. This action was so dramatic and so profound that it reached Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was jailed. This had a great deal to do with showing the power of the rank and file. There are no workers in the world that are more critical to the global economy than longshore workers. We're critical to shipping. Shipping was the first global industry. Hence, it was fundamental to the development of American capitalism. Let's move on. I want to talk about something that has been prevailing in the Black community for a number of years, but it wasn't until the ILWU made it clear to labor that it had a role in addressing this issue. I'm going to read something that I wrote a few years ago. It's called "Labor Can't Remain Silent on Racist Policing." ILWU Local 10 is in the vanguard of the labor movement, protesting and resisting acts of racist police terror on African Americans and other people of color for more than a decade. The murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Pamela Turner, Botham Jean, and a growing list of others must be viewed by labor for what they are: acts of racist police terror on one of the most exploited and oppressed sectors of the US multinational working class, African Americans. Rank and file members of all unions must demand that their locals strongly condemn these racist acts of injustice and demand justice for the families of the victims. There should be jail for killer cops who perpetuate these acts of racist policing. That leads to a historical action that took place on October 23rd, 2010. More than a year later, following the aftermath of the murder of Oscar Grant, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with that history. It was one of the first times that a racist killing of an unarmed African American was captured on videotape through cell phones, excuse me. The history of police violence is something that is very much a part of the history of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. Every July 5th, we commemorate the sacrifice of a longshore worker and a maritime worker, Howard Sperry and Nick Burdois, who was shot by San Francisco cops on July 5th, 1934, called Bloody Thursday. We understand the relationship between the police, whose interests they protect, and whose interests they don't. Every time there's a picket line, when cops come out, they come out to defend the boss and the powerful. After Oscar Grant was murdered, there was a lot of discussion about what action should be taken. We invited Cephas Johnson, who is the uncle of Oscar Grant, to come to Local 10 to speak. He addressed the membership. One of the things that he mentioned was that how he was struck by the silhouette that is outside of our Barrier Longshore Memorial Building that depicts where the two strikers were killed that I referred to earlier in 1934. He said that it brought to mind Oscar, who was shot on the platform at the Oakland BART station on January 1st, 2009. I said solidarity is not an empty slogan. The ILWU took a vote and decided that we were going to shut down all 5 Bay Area ports. The first time that labor has come out against the issue of police terror. It was historic. It took place on a Saturday at what we have renamed Oscar Grant Plaza in front of Oakland City Hall. In the interest of time, I'm going to have to pick it up a bit here. Suffice it to say that since 2015, every May Day, ILWU Local 10 has shut down all Bay Area ports for 8 hours, commemorating not only the struggle for the right for the 8-hour workday, but to connect that struggle to struggles of today. And every year since 2015, one of the #1 items on the agenda has been stopping police terror. Some of our white brothers and sisters have a difficult time in identifying with the Black working class because of white supremacy. I don't want to take up too much time, but we can talk about Dr. W.B. Du Bois's analysis, which he called the wages of whiteness, how anti-Black racism has become part of the identity of the white working class. We've seen this on full display just a few weeks ago with neo-fascists, right-wing zealots, neo-Confederates, white supremacists, the Proud Boys, 3%ers, all of them who took over the United States Capitol. Yeah, we got to deal with these contradictions in the white working class who think that they are part of another working class because of white supremacy. I have to remind our white brothers and sisters that long before Black people worked on the waterfront, that there was discrimination. They seemed to not understand until I explained to them what the doggone shape up was about, where people were picked for jobs based upon their ethnicity, family background, kickbacks. Discrimination is not limited to people of color. It's part of the modus operandi of the ruling class to divide and conquer. These are the issues and stories and narratives that we have to make clear. In conclusion, I've been reminded that I need to talk about this, and that is the historical action that took place on Juneteenth, 2000, that was June 19, 2020, the date that celebrates the enslavement of the enslaved Africans in Texas who learned about the Emancipation Proclamation and the end of the Civil War. Well, let me just say this. It's important that I point out how that happened. It didn't happen because of the international leadership of the ILWU, much like these other actions that I just spoke about regarding Local 10 didn't happen because of the international. It happened because of the rank and file at Local 10. Number one, the president of Local 10 currently, Trent Willis, third generation longshore worker like myself, who was the person that came up with the idea of the Million Worker March. Keith Shanklin, who in 2020 was the president of ILWU Local 34, the local that brother Alex Bagwell comes out of. These are the brothers who came up with the idea for the Juneteenth action. Both of them were very much involved in the organizing of the Million Worker March movement. It would not have been a Juneteenth without those two brothers. They were the ones who prevailed upon the president, Willie Adams, who's the first-time African-American president of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. And let me just say this, when the proposal was made to have Juneteenth as a day where we did not work for 8 hours, the employer had a counter proposal. They said you could have Flag Day, which has no historical significance. And not only did they insult longshoremen, but it's also on an overtime day. I don't know any longshoreman gonna give up on overtime day, but it's Flag Day for an action. That was unanimously rejected. Yes, we did shut down on Juneteenth. The first time that a labor organization has taken such action. However, something took place before that. And that was the call for all longshoremen on the West Coast to lay down their tools for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, commensurate with the time that George Floyd was murdered, a 21st century lynching in front of all of our eyes all around the world. Also initiated by Keith Shanklin and Trent Willis. And just for historical accuracy, the ILA also took an action that day as well. But unfortunately, they did not take one on Juneteenth, 2020. I'm going to conclude right now. I know I've given you some broad strokes. I've left out some actions, like for an example, what happened in 2017 when I think it was the group called, what is the name of that group? The prayer oath group, or the Patriot Prayer Group. Yeah, let me talk a little bit about that group. 2017, this is a racist right-wing group out of Portland, Oregon, whose members have killed folks on trains. They were going to have an action in San Francisco. ILWU Local 10 led the charge to oppose that rally, which did not take place. I'm going to wrap it up because I know people have questions, and I got another meeting coming up, so I can't be too late on this one. So I'm going to wrap it up. I want to thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this, and we can move on. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Clarence. Okay, who has a question? It's 2:50, and Clarence will just have to leave when he has to leave. I'm willing to hold the meeting open longer, but I know some people may have to go. So let's just start and see what happens. Who has a question? Raise your hand using the reactions box or wave it next to your thumbnail or put something in the chat.
Good.
Okay, Jack Heyman, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself. Jack, unmute yourself. Oh, there you go.
I'm unmuted.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I thought that was a brilliant, succinct history of the ILWU by Clarence. I've heard Clarence speak many, many times at our union meetings and at rallies, but to do this in just a few minutes, it's nothing short of brilliant. I didn't remember when you went into our strike in 2008 against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. That was in response to the police attacking anti-war protesters at the start of the war in Oakland in 2003, in which many people were wounded and sent to jail and beat up. I was one of them. And Clarence, the following day, led a contingent of people back into the port to reinforce our right of freedom of speech. And that was one of the things that Clarence did that he left out. The other thing is, in the middle of the Iraq War, Clarence and David Bacon went to Iraq in the middle of the war to solidarize with the workers there. And so 5 years after the start of the war in 2003, after the police attacked all the anti-war demonstrators and longshoremen, we had a strike that shut down every port on the West Coast, and our resolution, which was passed at our Longshore Caucus, stated explicitly against the imperialist wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, because the US had no business being over there in the first place. We shut down every port on the West Coast, and the brass band led us along the historic route of the Embarcadero with the Internationale. And I was so proud of that moment. Clarence, you did a brilliant job on all this. and you deserve all the credit you get. And I look forward to your book coming out.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jack, for that. But you know, any good speaker will always leave room for other ILWU members to add something to the discussion.
There you go.
I'm so glad that Jack brought that up. And he wrote that resolution, by the way, calling for us to do this. And the point that I sometimes lose sight of is that absolutely, in 2003, there was a peaceful demonstration opposing war profiteering at the port. And Jack mentioned that he was arrested. People were brutalized. There was a lawsuit. We also found out that there was all kind of illegal intelligence gathering and I don't know, sort of like COINTELPRO kind of bullshit that went down. And we found out about how that unfolded, how the city and the Port of Oakland collaborated with companies like SSA and APL to violate the civil rights. So thank you, Jack, for bringing that up. I appreciate it very much.
Lawrence, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
So we saw with horror what happened in DC on January 6th. This was the most open display of fascism and racism and anti-Semitism that I have seen in my lifetime in this country. This, I know I'm, as a Caucasian, I was and a son of Holocaust survivors, I was terrified. And I know the African-American community has seen worse, much worse. But I think, what do you recommend that, labor and progressives can do together with the African-American community? What can people on the left side of the political spectrum do about this time in our history where we seem to have this huge challenge from right-wing fascism that's very racist?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that in terms of practicality, we need to be addressing, the issues that we face right now. I mean, the whole question of accessibility to the COVID-19 vaccine, the whole question of, the funds that are needed by people, the working class. This whole idea of certain people should not get the money because they make over 150,000 or whatever the case may be. This whole issue concerning COVID-19 has really laid bare the disparities that exist in this country around the question of healthcare, so many education. So what I'm saying is we need to be coming together to address these issues. Healthcare, COVID-19 vaccine. We need infrastructure. Our bridges are crumbling. Our ports are antiquated. There's so much that is needed, but I'm trying to figure out how we can make the working class understand the commonality of our struggle. I was listening to a white woman who's a Democrat. I can't remember her name. I wish I could, but she was somehow insinuating that if Biden doesn't do something for the white working class in Michigan, that those individuals will become supporters of Donald Trump. Now, I know where she was coming from, but what I really resented is her thinking that the needs of workers in Michigan are any different from the workers in California or Mississippi or New York or New Jersey. And that's where this white supremacist mindset comes in. When they talk about the white working class, what do you mean the white worker? You're talking about the worker. This is a multinational working class today. So we need to be challenging white supremacy first and foremost, and not be afraid to call it out when we see it. Because all we do when we don't is just placate these reactionary forces. The Republican Party is the neo-fascist party. That's what we ought to say. And we ought to let Biden know that. So why are you wasting your time trying to negotiate with neo-fascists? Do what you got to do to get that money to people. But specifically around the question of what can progressives and labor do, we need to start working together and not against one another. Why is it that the Sierra Club is over here? People concerned with national health care is over another place. Labor rights is over there. It's wrong. We need to be coming together because we all have common interests if we choose to acknowledge that. So that's where I think we need to go.
I have one follow-up question, then I'll call on Deecha and everybody else. What about the Poor People's Campaign? Isn't that the kind of thing you're talking about, where we have a
Yes,
bring us together around a whole set of issues, not just one?
and another thing, we need to have a working class agenda. In this country, people seem to think that if you're not a lawyer or a professional politician, that you don't have a right to a vision, you don't have a right to a program. And we need to be very clear. We really do need a workers' party. But you know what? Let's be clear, that just doesn't happen overnight. We need to establish some worker assemblies with a workers' platform for people to run for local office. We need to start somewhere first. I don't believe we're going to be able to take over the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is not going to let that go. No, that ain't happening. The rich got two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. But we need to be very practical.
Okay, Deecha, then Michael, and then Alex. Deecha, you have to unmute yourself.
That work?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Be brief. Yes.
Oh, so I wanted to bring up the subject of song again, and that people singing together is magic. And it does pull people together. You need the organization and all, but I think that singing really has an effect.
Just because we're running out of time, I'm going to ask Michael and Alex to ask their questions and then let Clarence answer. Michael, go ahead briefly.
Yeah, so over the last 40 years, we've suffered from wage stagnation, benefit cuts, social security cuts, job insecurity, and it's affected the whole working class, white and non-white. And it's even decreased white workers' life expectancy. Well, the opening shots of this austerity onslaught in the 1980s was a huge wave of racism, racist drug wars, social service cuts, Klan and Nazi rallies, academics claiming scientific proof that Blacks were genetically low in intelligence and violence. And it shows that we all materially benefit from fighting racism. So Alex, do you think that fighting external society racism can help reduce one's internal racism?
And before you answer, I'm going to have Alex and Stan ask their questions.
Yes.
Yeah, can you be brief?
What is it? Well, I'm a person that's interested in action, and action on the basis of clear goals. Brother Clarence was mentioning two organizations that ought to get together. What were they again?
Oh, well, I spoke specifically of, I mentioned the Sierra Club. I mentioned, which is an environmental group. I mentioned the group that's talking about Medicare for all. I mentioned labor, and I'm saying that these forces should all be coming together.
All right, may I make a suggestion? May I make a suggestion?
Of course.
That we identify people from those very places and get them together and talk about action that we can engage in that will unify us.
Okay,
and
thank you.
therefore unify those that we identify with.
Thank you, Alex. And Stan, would you go ahead with your question or comment briefly?
Sure. Yeah, sure. Brief comment. There might be some really historic actions by the labor movement in the next few weeks. In Alabama, people probably heard this, suburb of Birmingham, there's a historical vote for union recognition at a very large Amazon facility. It could very well trigger a chain of events that lead to a national strike. And it's going to be very interesting to see how these so-called progressive Democrats will line up on that, because Jeff Bezos is probably the largest single contributor to the Democratic Party. So a lot of times people forget, as much as we despise Trump, the sole remaining Koch brother, the Bezos of the world and Elon Musk of the world are pretty bad news also. So anyway, this Saturday at 2 p.m. Get the exact time. Anyway, I believe it's at 4 p.m. You can go to the Amazon Workers Organizing Committee on Facebook. There's going to be a rally at Hilltop Mall at the Amazon there. And I believe there's also going to be one in San Francisco, but it hasn't been set yet. But go to Amazon Workers Organizing Committee and people can possibly come out for those. Because if they go on a national strike, that's going to be really monumentous. Amazon, by the way, is now the largest single employer in the US.
There's one demo on 24th Street, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. in front of the Whole Foods Market. Okay, Clarence, can you comment on any of the 4 or 5 questions I threw at you at once?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that Stan brought that up. I became aware of that sometimes last week. There's a number of things that are happening. I think that one of the things that one of the conditions that the COVID-19 has created is forced us to use Zoom. I know some of us may be getting a little Zoom fatigue, but Zoom can still be strategically used. Forums like this, I'm glad that Stan brought that up. I've been so preoccupied with working on this anthology. I'm hoping to have it out before May Day, certainly, hopefully before April. But there's a number of things going on. I have friends who are very involved with education. There's a big push to open up the schools because they want people to get back to work. The unions have been talking about how it's unsafe. And so what I see is that the attacks on teachers' unions is now fermenting. We need to be very, very careful at this juncture. Because certain things can trigger. But I think the first thing that we need to do is that we need to be talking to one another. And another thing too, those of us on the left, we're going to have to, a lot of us call ourselves revolutionaries. Well, let me just say this, we got to be where the people are. And we need to be agitating, we need to be organizing. These changes are not going to happen overnight, but we have an obligation to young people. That's one of the things that has driven me to do this book, this anthology, is because young people need to hear the story about the ILWU Local 10, because there's a great deal that they can learn from us. So this is a good start, and I'm glad everyone, I don't have very much more to say. Listen, I can share this with you. A right-wing billionaire by the name of John Fisher wants to build a baseball park, a 3,000 condominium development, and 1.2 million square feet of retail space at the 3rd busiest port on the West Coast, which is the Port of Oakland. If we really want to understand the crisis of capitalism that would drive a multi-billionaire to go up against international shipping companies, stevedoring companies, some of the employees that pay the best wages in the country, and say, we want to set up a ballpark here and a development. It's like building an amusement park on an assembly line. And you've had Democrats like Nancy Skinner and Rob Bonta, who've been running interference for this. So there's a great deal of confusion going on. We gotta be willing to call these people out. One of the reasons why this thing has stalemated is because of the development of COVID-19. But I'm just illustrating a point here. With houselessness and disease and lack of housing. And you're talking about building 3,000 condominiums at the third busiest port that employs predominantly people of color, where Black women make the same as white women and white men, where 84,000 jobs are generated from the port. So this is the world we live in today. So when we begin to talk about how do we stop that, by any means necessary, that's what I like to close, by any means necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Clarence. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. This won't be the last time, hopefully, we get together and talk.
I hope not.
Not be. Good luck.
It's been great being with you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks
all
for
of you
being here. If anybody wants to stick around, we are going to have, I mean, we could discuss this a bit further, but we also have an obligation to have a SF Gray Panther membership meeting. It is 10 minutes past the hour when we said we would finish this event, so it'll be understandable if people, have to go. But thank you for coming, and if you want to stay connected with us, put your name in the chat, or call me, or send me an email. And you can also put your thoughts in the chat, which we will save. If you didn't get a chance to express yourself, you can put it in the chat, and we'll save it and look at it. So at this point, I'm gonna say the meeting is over with our guests, but those who want to stay for a Gray Panther membership meeting and to talk to the board are welcome to stay. Anybody else who wants to stay is also welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so
thank you to our guests so much.
oh yeah, thank you, Alex, Harriet, and Clarence, who's probably already gone. And thank you for your attention and for being here. So
I did mention the Workers' Party in the chat.
thank you, Roger. Okay, so I want to identify the board members who are here of the Gray Panthers. I see Ann Kolachidas, Michael Lyon, Ellen Yoshitsugu was here. I'm not sure she's still here. And I am here as the convener, as a member of the board. So there's anybody else that I missed? I think Matthew was here. I don't know. I don't think he's still here. But if anybody here has questions for the board of the Gray Panthers, you're welcome to ask them now. Some of us are here. I see a hand from the person whose phone number ends in 8442. Is that, oh, that might be Karen.
Yes, it is.
Okay, Karen, you want to identify yourself as a board member? That would, or did you have a question or comment?
No, I just wanted you to know that I'm here as a board member.
Thank you. Thank you for raising your hand and identifying yourself. So there's 4 of us here out of a 7-member board. And if anybody wants to ask us any questions, you're welcome to do so. We're looking for new members. We're looking for board members, and our main function right now is holding a monthly meeting each month. Next month, we're actually going to have a monthly meeting plus a special meeting on March 9th, which is a Tuesday. We're going to have 2 people from the Poor People's Campaign, the Bay Area Poor People's Campaign. They're affiliated with the state, a part of it, and the national. They're going to be giving a presentation about the Poor People's Campaign. So that has potential for being the kind of grouping of people on multi-issue basis to push for a progressive agenda together instead of organization by organization. And on March 16th, Michael Lyon has organized a meeting for the Gray Panthers on long-term social services, LTSS. Michael, do you want to say a little bit about what's going to happen at that meeting? I think somebody from Hand in Hand will be speaking. Michael?
Yeah, Lindsay Amai Hong, who's been leading it from Hand in Hand, but who has also been leading a grassroots effort to have long-term services and supports for all, kind of like Medicare for all, is going to be speaking. And we're hoping to have people understand that this campaign for long-term services for all in California is it's an extremely wide campaign involving people who need this kind of care, people who give the workers who give this kind of care. And there's just all kinds of ways that people can participate in the story of how this came about years ago.
So that's
Started by the domestic workers. It's an amazing story, and I hope it will be inspiring us to get more involved in this campaign.
We're
Thank
going
you.
to publicize those two meetings. It's March 9th and March 16th, 2 successive Tuesdays. Karen, you have your hand up?
Yeah. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I lost track. I just wanted to suggest that we also might ask folks who are here today to give us ideas for future Gray Panthers general meetings.
You can do that now orally, or you can put it in the chat or contact any of the four of us. Anybody have an idea off the top of their head of something that they think we should address at a monthly meeting like the one we had today? And if you don't raise your hand now, or you can put it in the chat or contact us later.
Well, one thing that's popular right now is the public banking. Now, we may have done that in the past, but that might be, they're starting up again around public banking here in San Francisco. So it might be interesting to talk a little bit about that. It might be a little too soon, I don't know, but there is some movement there again. And I think Supervisor Preston has a resolution or something around it. So you might talk to his office for the in the future.
Thank you. Any other suggestions or questions for the board? Anything else anybody wants to bring up about the Gray Panthers, what we should be doing? You know, we'd love to be in the streets. Theoretically, we could be in the streets if we social distance and wear masks. But you know, Zoom also obviously is the alternative. There may be others.
What do you think you're going to do when we can get together? Are you going to maintain the Zoom meetings and have meetings together? And how would you do that?
Well, transitionally, we could maintain both. I mean, we could maintain the Zoom and just, you know, and also have an in-person meeting, because some people might not be comfortable coming to that first one. We wouldn't want to do it in an unsafe way. It's just something the board will discuss at our next meeting.
It's probably well into the future, you know, the fall, maybe even.
Yeah, who knows when this thing's going to end. David Quinley, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was wondering, since you guys been talking about a workers' party, where do you see the Green Party, since I represented up here in Sacramento County, having a place in your various movements?
So the question is, are we open to discussing a workers' party, or do we want to have a forum?
Do you see the Green Party as part of that thing, or is it something that, or is Worker Party something separate for you?
I'm not opposed to discussing new or parties outside of the traditional two big parties. That's me. Anybody else on the board have an opinion about discussion of third parties, Workers' Party, etc.? The Gray Panthers, because of our tax status, we don't emphasize electoral politics. We can support ballot measures, but we can't support candidates openly, but we talk about elections, we can evaluate candidates, we can evaluate parties, but we just can't actively promote a particular candidate. I believe that's our limitation as a 501c3. Michael Lyon will correct me if I'm wrong.
You are right.
Okay. Anybody else want?
This is Ann. I keep hearing like, oh, we have to, like really press Joe Biden, make Joe Biden do these things he says he's going to do, because, and I just wonder if that's worthy of some discussion, how we might do that, particularly since Gray Panthers has a national presence and a reputation.
I can tell you that the National Council of Gray Panther Networks actively pushes members of Congress and Joe Biden. For example, the most recent National Council of Gray Panthers Network Issues Committee National Action Alert involves pushing for the $15 an hour minimum wage. And we have done, the National Council has done other things to push the national agenda and is actively still, talking about those kinds of things. Just because we can't promote a candidate doesn't mean we can't agitate for current members of the legislature to do things.
Right.
And we should.
If we're like all
interested.
pushing in the direction.
That's why I invited the Poor People's Campaign to come to address us, because I see that as an option for a broad push of an agenda where it's not only on single payer, it's also on $15 an hour and immigration and anti-racism and a number of other issues that progressives care about and tend to agree upon. So I think that would be, that's why I organized that particular meeting.
I mostly came because I'm a huge fan of Paul Robeson. I have always been very impressed by him, and so that was the main reason I came. And I thought I'd bring you up. I used to go to some of the events, the Gray Panthers of Marin's events up at their Redwoods area. When I used to live in Marin County, I don't know if I ever went to a San Francisco Gray Panthers. I did follow them online though.
Well,
I followed you guys online for a long time.
Thank you for coming. Now that we're on Zoom, there's no limitation to which Gray Panther network you can support or participate in. And there's also room for probably a Sacramento Gray Panthers, because there you are in Sacramento, near the seat of power of our state. And it's more convenient for you to agitate in Sacramento in a way, although. Well,
yeah, I guess I'm not willing to see myself as a Gray Panther yet.
Okay. We have an informal formation called the California Gray Panthers, which now consists of informally 4 cities Gray Panther networks: Long Beach, Berkeley, San Francisco, and the new network in Santa Barbara. And when we have activated that network to have a united agenda on certain things, like the Governor's Commission on Aging. What's the formal title, Michael? It's
master plan.
Thank you.
And so where there's a statewide issue like the Governor's Commission on a Healthy California for All, or the Master Plan on Aging, or disability rights that come up, whenever there's a statewide issue, we can flex our muscles as Gray Panthers and prowl and growl to push an agenda. Go ahead, Ann.
Well, I think if there's anything we want out of Governor Newsom, now would be the time to ask, because it looks like they got the signatures for the recall. And I can only imagine that, that nonsense he did with the vaccine when he was supposed to do the, the essential workers first and the frontline workers first. And then he ended up moving it to the seniors down. Now it's going to be down to 65 pretty soon. And that's like totally a flip flop on how it was originally intended.
Yeah,
he just needs that senior vote.
Yeah.
Well, my big issue with Newsom right now is probably and it's probably the same one I've had for a while, is fracking, his support of fracking. It's actually, I really don't understand why he even supports it, but he must have get a lot of contributions from them or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Jerry Brown has a similar stance. There may, sometimes there are forces acting on these politicians that have to do with threats to their holding office by powerful moneyed interests who have something to gain by lobbying them, and it happens with single payer. You see, we've seen that happen, and we've seen it with that multiple times. And as I said, fracking was something that I don't think Jerry Brown opposed either. There is a related organization that you may or may not be aware of. It's called California Alliance for Retired Americans. And this Friday at noon, there is a meeting by California Alliance for Retired Americans on the climate change issue. So are you familiar, David, with California Alliance for Retired Americans? It's an excellent organization.
I don't think I've heard of them, actually.
You should check out CARA. It's really well organized and a very effective organization when it comes to the issues of interest to seniors and the disabled, and just good government. So
and they focus a lot at the state level.
Yeah, state legislation is a big focus, like as is the this informal gripping of California Gray Panther networks. Are there any more questions or comments? We're dwindling down to 7. Michael?
Yeah, I wanted to ask David, are you still in contact with any of those Gray Panthers in Marin?
No. Yeah, as soon as I moved up to Sacramento, I started a new job, and I just, if it wasn't online, it just was really hard for me to connect. I've only been to Marin County back a handful of times since then, and I haven't been there in a long time. And yeah, it's just really hard to keep all my contacts. It's just if it's not online, it's really hard.
Well, if you could give us their phone numbers or email addresses, that would really be helpful.
Well, I could try. You just look them up. I don't particularly have their thing. I was not a member. I just went to their events. I saw them online or in the newspaper, and went to their events. A lot of them I knew may not even be around anymore. So it's really hard. I could try looking them up and see if there's anyone if anyone remembers me, but yeah, I was never. It was never one of my main groups.
Right. So, David, I'm just putting a phone number of somebody you can call in about Sacramento in the California Alliance for Retired Americans.
Well, hang on. It's in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, just appeared.
It takes me a minute to get back. I'm on my phone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I could read it off to you if you'd like, just to jot it down.
I see it. I just need to get a pen and write it down. Pencil or something.
You can save the chat by clicking on the 3 dots.
Writing instruments.
I did a preliminary search, and Fred Meyer was the liaison for Marin.
I think he's passed away though, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he passed away within the last year or so.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 57 years old, so I'm not that far away from being one of you guys.
Age and youth in action.
That's right. We don't have an age requirement.
And those issues affect us all eventually.
Yeah, we're all in this together, and the issues that help the elderly also help other people of other ages. We're not really. It's like unions. in their best sense, they push for an agenda that is helpful to the community surrounding them, not just their own, narrow interests.
No. And youths tend to have a lot of power because they tend to vote.
Okay, it's now almost 3:30. There's 7 of us left. Is there anything else you guys want to discuss?
Art, I was just going to say Newsom on the Central Valley Water Project, and he also has not been stopping the clear cutting as well. And 2 other things.
Yeah. So that's something else we could look at.
I have a question of Clarence. Thank you so much for coming, by the way. It was really good. I was wondering, I know you're terribly busy yourself, but I'm wondering if you have friends or know people who might be interested in joining us.
Are you talking to Clarence?
I'm talking to Clarence, yeah. He's muted.
I don't even know if he's still there because he had to go to another, he might have left it on just.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
I don't think he's really here.
Okay. We should ask him though.
Yeah, and what's the question for Clarence?
Does he know people who might be interested in joining us?
The Gray Panthers?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I understand he knows some Black Panthers. That's what I heard.
Having been one himself once.
Oh, so are we going to get berets? Speaking of.
Well, I'm interested. Is that shop in Berkeley and Telegraph on the corner of Telegraph and I can't remember with Bancroft or something? They had $15 berets, which was not too bad, and a selection. So, yeah, I'm interested. T-shirts.
What color?
Huh?
Gray.
Gray, of course.
That's cool. It goes with everything.
Yeah, basic gray.
Also, Berkeley might be interested in getting them too.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that we didn't see any of those folks today.
We saw there was one Gray Panther from Berkeley I saw. Her name was Cricket or Carol Crooks.
Oh, okay.
She was here. Well,
One of my dancers showed up. She showed up last time and today she shows up right at the end like she's got something else going on. I'm gonna have to call her.
Well, I think the Berkeley Gray Panthers also have their weekly meeting, I think is the same time as ours. I think it starts at 1:30. And they have their meetings every week.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But it's Wednesday, no?
It could be Wednesday, but it seems to me we've overlapped. I'm not sure if it's Tuesday or Wednesday.
Well, we should fix that sometime.
Fix how? What?
Well, we should adjust the schedule so that.
So that they can come to ours, and we can go to theirs.
Well, I would think.
Yeah.
Or join them.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Combine them.
Oh, I thought I should mention I was actually born in San Francisco.
Oh.
Spent my first 12 and a half years there.
Which neighborhood?
Glen Park.
Oh, great neighborhood.
And for a short time out in the Bay Area, I was near in California near the Clement Street shopping area.
Love
But
Glen Park.
I don't remember that. But it was mostly Glen Park.
They have a wonderful canyon there and recreation center.
Yep.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in there as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, you feel like you're out in the country somewhere.
I think it's, if you don't count the golf course, it's the second biggest park in San Francisco.
Wow.
So Art, you're going to send me the recording of this.
Yeah.
Great. That was very.
Yeah. So we can put it up on YouTube.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for reminding me to record. I needed 2 reminders at least.
I think you guys have connections. Sorry. I think you guys have connections to the Unitarian Church. I was wondering how they're doing.
We used to meet there. We used to meet in person at the Unitarian Center, the First Unitarian Universalist Center, at Geary and Franklin.
Yeah, I used to go there as a kid.
It's a
I
great-
did an art show a long time ago from a friend who I knew when I was in Marin County. But that was kind of the last time I was in there. How are they doing?
They're doing great. I mean, it's a great organizing center. They're very hospitable. We did leave them when they raised the rent on us. We were meeting at the Haight-Ashbury public library branch instead. And when the COVID started, we went to Zoom. That was in February or March last year.
And we've had good
Do
attendance.
libraries charge too?
No. Anne, go ahead.
And we've had good attendance and really a great lineup of speakers since we've gone online. So it's really been great.
Yeah, there are some advantages to being on Zoom.
Yeah, I think that I think when we can start getting out there, it's masked and socially distanced, but still get out there. It'll be for demonstrations, street actions, and things like that. But I predict we'll maintain a lot of this technology for meetings. I mean, we how else would we have a California Great Panthers if it weren't for Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, what about this? All the vaccine people not taking vaccine in long-term care. Have you heard about that?
I mean, they're inclined not to take it, or they're not getting enough.
Right. Well, I know,
Oh.
yeah, they're inclined not to take it. Now, my friend who works in a place, she didn't have a choice. Like, she did not want it. She pretty much doesn't like vaccines. I've known her for years. She didn't want to do the flu vaccine, but she finally, after they said, okay, well, you can wear a mask all flu season. Well, that's pretty hard to deal with. So anyway, but yeah, people are turning it down. And the problem is if, you're not going to get to a point that it's good with so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more people that take it, the safer we'll be, and you stop the mutations.
I think to be able to have credibility among lower paid and people of color workers in healthcare and nursing homes and places like that, we have to be very upfront about admitting the past history of racism in medicine and the Tuskegee experiments and things like that. And I think that's really the only way that we're going to be able to get the trust of people like that. And
Well, I just heard this report that's saying that they had, or something I read, that their social media situation is so robust that that's where the messages are all coming from, in their own language, of course, from their own people. And I think it's hard to get, how do you get the message through when they have what is a pretty reliable source of information themselves?
So their social media is reinforcing opposition to getting vaccinated.
Well, just, questions, like there's no, public health line. This is just people talking, and all kinds of stuff gets said. But, one of the things I heard, and I don't know if it was made up or what, about the vaccine, the reason they're able to bring it out so quickly is because they didn't have to store it. Part of the trial is how long does it take to spoil? And because it was going to be rolled out and used right away, that they didn't have to put it on a shelf for 9 months and see what happens to it. Is that like BS to you? I don't know. That's what I heard.
Didn't hear that. I don't know. That's the problem with the internet.
Well, the news has always been fake. It's just that we at least have one version of it. Yeah. One version of fake news, and now we have a million versions of fake.
So confusing.
Well, as far as it's being new and untested, the technique of using mRNA as a vaccine goes back to MERS and SARS, so it's not a new thing. It's been worked on for quite a while.
Right. They had the components of it. And
Michael has a background in physiology, so he speaks with a certain amount of credibility.
yes, well, that's good. And also, you know, since they've done, you know, with the genetic work they've done in the last how many years, I mean, you know, it really changes everything as far as development of stuff. But anyway, well, if we're done, I was gonna go out and enjoy the day. The sun came in.
Take advantage of whatever sunshine's left.
Yeah.
Looks good
Is
out
it,
there. Okay,
is
thank
it,
you.
is it sunny where you are?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's sunny.
it is.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, it is here too.
Let's get out there.
Bye, Kiki.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, great program.
Thank
Yes,
you.
very good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.